The rain streaked across the towering glass windows of Andrew Blake's office, mirroring his mood. From the 40th floor, the bustling streets of New York City seemed like another world, alive, energetic, and far removed from his own sense of emptiness. At 35, Andrew had achieved what many only dreamed of. As one of the most sought-after architects in the country, his designs had reshaped skylines, yet, even surrounded by accolades, something always felt missing. A soft buzz broke his reverie. His assistant Rachel spoke through the intercom. "Mr. Blake, the team for the blood drive is ready downstairs." Andrew straightened his tie, a reflexive habit that helped him mask his inner restlessness. "Thanks, Rachel. I'll be right there," he replied. The blood drive was Andrew's idea, a deeply personal initiative inspired by a memory from his childhood. His sister's life had once been saved by a stranger's blood donation, and Andrew had always carried the hope of paying it forward. As he rolled up his sleeve, the nurse preparing the kit smiled. "Roll blood," she remarked. "That's an incredibly rare type." The next morning, Andrew's phone rang with an urgent call from the hospital. His blood donation was needed immediately for a critical patient, a young boy named Matthew, who had been admitted after a severe accident. Without hesitation, Andrew agreed, his curiosity piqued by the nurse's emphasis on the boy's rare blood type. At the hospital, Andrew met a nurse who thanked him warmly. "You've likely saved his life," she said. "Matthew has Rh Noel blood, just like you. It's so rare that finding a match is almost impossible." Andrew froze. Noel blood was known as golden blood, shared by only a handful of people worldwide. But it wasn't just the rarity that unsettled him. It was the boy's name, Matthew, and the brief glance he caught of the child's profile through the room's window. Dark curls framed Matthew's pale face as he lay quietly, a book resting on his lap. Something about him, a familiarity Andrew couldn't explain, stirred emotions he hadn't felt in years. A memory surfaced, unbidden. 5 years ago, Andrew's relationship with Isabel, a medical student he had deeply loved, had ended abruptly. She had vanished without explanation, leaving Andrew to wrestle with unanswered questions and lingering heartache. The nurse's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Matthew's recovering, but he's from an orphanage. It's remarkable to find another person with his blood type, let alone willing to donate." Andrew's mind raced. The timeline fit too perfectly. 5 years since Isabel disappeared. Matthew looked to be about that age. And that blood type, an anomaly often passed through genetics. By the time Andrew left the hospital, his thoughts were a whirlwind. Could this boy be his son? Could Isabel have hidden her pregnancy? The weight of possibility pressed down on him as he gazed out at the rainy cityscape. The answers were within reach, but uncovering them could change everything. Andrew returned to the hospital the next day, unable to shake the possibility that Matthew might be his son. This time, he asked to see the boy, using the pretext of checking on his recovery. When Andrew stepped into Matthew's room, he was struck by how small the boy looked in the large hospital bed. Matthew was engrossed in a book, his tiny fingers tracing the worn edges of the pages. Dark curls framed his pale face, and when he glanced up, his hazel eyes, so much like Andrew's own, seemed to hold a depth no child should have. "Hi, Matthew," Andrew said softly, forcing his voice to remain steady. "I'm Andrew. I'm the one who donated the special blood that helped you get better." Matthew looked at him cautiously, clutching his book tighter. "Thank you," he whispered after a moment, his voice barely audible. Andrew smiled and gestured to the chair beside the bed. "May I sit? What are you reading?" Matthew hesitated but then held up the cover. "Where the Wild Things Are." "That's one of my favorites," Andrew said, settling into the chair. "Would you like me to read it to you?" Slowly, Matthew nodded, his grip on the book loosening. Andrew began reading, his voice soft yet animated, and as the story unfolded, he noticed the boy inching closer to the edge of the bed. By the time Max returned from his wild adventure, Matthew was leaning slightly toward Andrew, his guard dropping ever so slightly. A nurse entered the room, smiling as she checked Matthew's vitals. "He's a quiet one," she said kindly. "The orphanage mentioned he's been through a lot. Sometimes it takes a while for kids like him to trust again." Andrew's chest tightened at her words. The thought of Matthew navigating a world without the protection of a family filled him with a fierce protectiveness he hadn't expected. That night, Andrew couldn't stop replaying the encounter in his mind. The resemblance between himself and Matthew was undeniable, and the boy's rare blood type only deepened his suspicions. Unable to ignore the growing certainty in his heart, Andrew made a bold decision. The next day, he quietly arranged for a DNA test, submitting his own sample and obtaining one from Matthew under the pretext of medical necessity. The results came back days later, confirming what Andrew already felt in his soul. Matthew was his son. The paper trembled in Andrew's hands as he read the conclusive words: 99.99% probability of paternity. He sank into a chair, overwhelmed by a mix of emotions: relief, anger at the years lost, and an undeniable surge of love for the boy he barely knew but already felt bound to. With the DNA results in hand, Andrew's determination to uncover the full truth about Matthew's past and Isabel's disappearance grew stronger. He reached out to his trusted private investigator, Elliot Grant, to dig deeper. "Elliot, I need everything you can find on a boy named Matthew. He's from an orphanage, but I know he's my son," Andrew said firmly. "And find Isabel. I need to know what happened to her 5 years ago." Elliot worked quickly, and within days, Andrew had answers that shook him to his core. The investigator confirmed that Matthew had been placed in an orphanage shortly after birth, but the circumstances were highly suspicious. The adoption paperwork was riddled with inconsistencies, with clear signs of forgery. Elliot's investigation also uncovered troubling details about Victor Martinez, Isabel's father. Victor, a powerful businessman with a reputation for ruthlessness, had orchestrated Andrew and Isabel's separation. He fabricated photos and emails to convince Isabel that Andrew had been unfaithful. When Isabel discovered she was pregnant, Victor manipulated her into believing that placing the baby for adoption was the only way to secure her future and protect her child. Andrew's fists clenched as he read through the report. The thought of Isabel enduring years of manipulation and Matthew growing up without a family filled him with a white-hot anger. Elliot's final revelation was a lead on Isabel's current whereabouts. She was working as a pediatric resident in Boston. Andrew stared out the window, the city lights reflected in his stormy gaze. "I've lost 5 years with my son," he muttered. "Victor took Isabel from me and Matthew's childhood away. It's time to make things right." His next steps were clear: confront Victor, find Isabel, and bring his family back together. Andrew wasted no time. Armed with the DNA results and the truth uncovered by Elliot, he arranged a meeting with Victor Martinez. The older man's office exuded power and control, qualities that Andrew now viewed as weapons Victor had used to destroy lives. Victor greeted Andrew with a polished smile, but his expression soured as soon as Andrew revealed the DNA test. "Matthew is my son," Andrew said, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and heartbreak. "For 5 years you kept him and Isabel away from me. You didn't just steal time, you stole a family." Victor didn't flinch. "I did what was necessary to protect my daughter. You would have ruined her future." "Her future?" Andrew shot back, his composure breaking. "You stole her choices, manipulated her, and left our son in an orphanage. That's not protection, that's control." Victor's calm facade finally cracked. "You'll never prove it," he sneered. Andrew stepped closer, meeting Victor's glare. "The lies, the stolen years, the lives you've ruined. They'll all come to light, and when they do, your empire will crumble. But I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to reclaim what you took." As Andrew left Victor's office, a storm of emotions raged inside him: anger, sadness, and above all, determination. He had confronted the man who had stolen so much, but the real work was only beginning. There was no time to dwell on the past. Elliot's lead about Isabel being in Boston replayed in his mind. She needed to know the truth, and he needed to see her again, to give her the chance to reunite with Matthew. Later that day, Andrew arrived in Boston. Elliot's lead had been accurate. Isabel was working as a pediatric resident at Massachusetts General Hospital. Seeing her for the first time in years left Andrew momentarily breathless. She was still the Isabel he remembered, her determined expression softened only by the faint shadow of sadness that lingered in her eyes. "Andrew?" Isabel froze when she saw him. "I know this is a shock," Andrew began, his voice trembling slightly, "but I need to tell you something. About Matthew." At the mention of the name, Isabel's breath caught. "Matthew?" she whispered. "Yes, he's our son." Isabel shook her head, disbelief warring with hope in her eyes. "That's not possible. My father, he told me." Her voice faltered. "He lied," Andrew interrupted gently. He handed her the DNA results. "You didn't lose him. He's alive, and he's waiting for us." Tears filled Isabel's eyes as she read the document. I need to see him." Andrew nodded, a small smile breaking through his own emotion. "Then let's go home." The reunion was overwhelming for everyone. When Andrew and Isabel walked into Matthew's hospital room together, the boy looked up from his book, his hazel eyes filled with cautious curiosity. "Matthew," Andrew said gently, kneeling to meet his son's gaze. "This is Isabel. She's your mom." Matthew studied her for a long moment before softly asking, "Are you the lady from my dreams? The one who sings?" Isabel choked back a sob, nodding through her tears. "Yes, my love. I sang to you every night before everything." Tentatively, Matthew reached out, his small hand brushing hers. "Can you sing now?" Isabel knelt beside him, her voice trembling as she began a familiar lullaby. The soft melody wrapped around them, and Matthew leaned into her embrace for the first time. Within weeks, Andrew, Isabel, and Matthew began building a new life together in Seattle. Andrew had already purchased a house, a home designed with Matthew in mind. Matthew's new room was a sanctuary, walls painted a calming blue, a ceiling that came alive with glowing constellations at night, and a cozy reading nook filled with books. Most importantly, a memory wall stood proudly, waiting to be filled with moments of joy and milestones. The transition wasn't easy. Matthew's past left scars that couldn't be erased overnight. Flashbacks of his time in the orphanage, being locked in the basement as punishment, surfaced during quiet moments. But Andrew and Isabel faced each challenge with unwavering patience. One evening, as they tucked Matthew into bed, he looked up at them hesitantly. "Will you stay forever?" he asked, his voice small but filled with hope. Andrew knelt beside him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "This is your home now," he promised, "forever and always." Isabel smiled through tears, adding, "We're not going anywhere, sweetheart." Matthew's grip on his favorite stuffed bear tightened as he whispered, "Okay." In time, laughter replaced silence, and love began to heal the wounds of the past. The family spent their days creating new memories, stargazing in the garden, reading together in the library, and filling the memory wall with moments of happiness. Their journey wasn't over, but together they had found their home. Months passed, and the family settled into their new life in Seattle. Andrew and Isabel worked tirelessly to ensure Matthew's happiness and stability, but their journey wasn't just about their own healing. They were determined to help others who had experienced the same pain and separation. Victor Martinez, stripped of his power, faced justice. The forged documents and illegal adoption schemes were uncovered, revealing a web of corruption that spanned multiple states. Victor was sentenced to 25 years in prison, with no chance of early release. His downfall marked the end of a sinister network that had torn countless families apart. For Isabel, the legal victory brought some closure, but another matter lingered in her heart: her relationship with her father. Despite everything he had done, a part of her sought understanding. One afternoon, Isabel visited Victor in prison. He looked older, his once commanding presence diminished by the weight of his crimes. When he saw her, his expression shifted from surprise to regret. "I didn't expect you to come," he admitted, his voice hollow. "I needed to see you," Isabel replied, her tone steady but laced with pain. "Not because what you did was excusable, it wasn't. But for my own peace, for Matthew's future. I'm choosing to forgive." Victor's eyes widened. "How can you forgive me after what I took from you, from Matthew?" "Because holding on to the anger won't help me, or Matthew," Isabel said, her voice trembling slightly. "You did terrible things, but I refuse to let your choices define my life any longer. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means I'm choosing to move forward." Victor lowered his head, guilt etched into his features. "I wish I could undo it all. I truly believed I was protecting you." Isabel stood. "Maybe you believed that, but it wasn't your choice to make. Still, I hope you find a way to make peace with yourself." Back home, Isabel shared the experience with Andrew and Matthew. As she recounted the conversation with her father, her voice trembled with both pain and hope. "I don't know if he'll ever truly change," she admitted, "but forgiving him was for us, for our family. Holding on to the past won't help us move forward." Andrew placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're right," he said softly. "We've come so far already, and together, we'll make sure Matthew knows nothing but love and safety from here on." Matthew, who had been listening quietly from his reading nook, looked up. "Does this mean we don't have to talk about the bad stuff anymore?" Isabel knelt beside him, brushing a curl from his forehead. "We'll always remember, sweetheart. But now, we get to fill our lives with good things, like stargazing and stories. What do you think about that?" Matthew smiled and nodded, the weight of the past beginning to lift. The family continued their work at the New Horizons Family Reunification Center, helping others find healing. One evening, as they sat under the stars in their backyard, Matthew grinned and said, "These stars are my favorite. They remind me that we're all together now." "Yes," Isabel agreed, taking Andrew's hand, "because this is where love grows." As the evening turned to night, the family remained under the stars, each finding comfort in the stillness. Matthew lay with his head on Isabel's lap, his favorite stuffed bear clutched tightly in his arms. "Mom, Dad," Matthew murmured sleepily, his bear still clutched tightly. "Do you think the stars tell stories about families, like how they find their way back to each other?" Andrew smiled, glancing at Isabel before responding. "Maybe they do, buddy. Maybe they tell stories about how families find each other no matter what." Matthew's eyes fluttered closed, his breathing slowing as sleep claimed him. Isabel met Andrew's gaze, her own eyes filled with gratitude. "We're finally where we belong," she whispered. Andrew nodded, his hand finding hers. "Together," he said simply. "Life has a way of challenging us in ways we could never imagine." For Andrew, Isabel, and Matthew, their journey wasn't just about finding each other. It was about forgiveness, healing, and creating a future together. Their story is a testament to the resilience of love and the strength it takes to move forward, even after betrayal and loss. What would you do if a lie completely changed the course of your life, separating you from the people you love? Would you seek justice first, or choose forgiveness and focus on rebuilding? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Every journey is unique, and your perspective matters. If this story moved you, consider subscribing to our channel for more tales of hope, redemption, and resilience. And don't forget to share this video with someone who might need a reminder of the power of love and forgiveness. Thank you for watching and being part of our community. Until next time, remember, even in the darkest moments, there's always a path to healing and light.